Hello, hello, hello. What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I'm Dave Smith. He's Robbie the Fire Bernstein, and we are back in the Gas Digital Studios. This is a first podcast we've done here since, I believe, 2022.
And they gave us Studio B. What the people?
Well,
this was supposed to be our triumphant return, and you stick us in the small studio?
Yeah, look, it's bullshit. It's bullshit what's happening here. There's no question about that. In their defense, we left the network.
Oh. Wait, we're not on the network anymore?
We're not on the network.
Oh,
so they do have a leg to stand on where they could say we don't get the studio of our choice. Do you know what they're charging me to record here?
I do not.
Do you know?
No.
No, nothing.
Oh.
That's ridiculous. But that would be insane. That would be insane if they were. But no, but they did say A was taken. No, I didn't want to bump good Zach Amico out of A. That was a kind of a dick way to say it. It was almost like I could have bumped Zach out of A, but I didn't want to bump. No, I didn't even really test my juice like that. But I don't know. Maybe I could have. Maybe I would have been like, no, you got to bump Zach, and they'd have been like, no, that's not that. It's not that important that you get Studio A. Anyway, the point is we're back here. We're back here in the studio, across from the studio where it all started.
I like the high chairs. I get to be your height.
That is true. That is true. We are equal height. You might even be a little bit taller than me. It doesn't look like it on that camera, but you're up there with me. It is a little bit strange coming back here because this is even we've been on this network for so many years, but Legion of Skanks we do over at the Stand. And part of the problem, I've been doing at my home for years now. So this is the place where I used to come to work all the time, and I'm back here so infrequently now that it does kind of like, I don't know, it just brings back memories of 2018 or whatever it was. And it's like I can just smell the poverty. I come back here and I'm just like, oh yeah, late on rent. I remember what that smelled like.
Except that everyone here is so rich.
Yeah, well, not us.
Not us. I mean, everyone else is so, it's all, I feel like when I walk around here, it's like a movie set of extras where it's just all these kids with the wealthiest parents. They've never done anything in their entire lives, so their skin just still is like Nancy Pelosi out of a clinic fresh.
Do you feel like it's changed drastically in that regard? Because I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like New York City has really changed. It is like, I remember, whatever. I know I'm an old man, so when I talk about this, it like puts me in a different category. But when I got out of college, I didn't say graduate, but when I got out,
I mean left. I think the word is just left.
Okay, when I quit college, I wasn't there for long. I was there for a year and a half, and let me tell you, that half, there were no classes happening whatsoever. But anyway, I remember it being like, you could find an apartment for like $1,200 a month. You could find that place if you got like a good deal or something like that. And you get $1,200 a month with a roommate, and you're like, okay, I got to make $600 a month toward rent, and then everything else is going toward beer. It was like you could start a life. And then around, I don't know, I want to say around like when I was living down here in this neighborhood, you could get like maybe like $2,500 a month. You could get an apartment for. Now, if you lived with your girlfriend or if you lived with a roommate or something
and
like
that. And
a
couple rats.
We did have some rats. Anyway, but okay, so then that would be the deal. And it was still like, oh man, it's getting a little expensive here, but like you could maybe pull it off. The rents have gone up so much now that, I mean, I don't think I saw one thing. My wife just sent me a listing that was now I don't know. I'm not like really following New York real estate like this, but she sent me a listing that was a 1-bedroom apartment down here and the rent was $7,000 a month.
Yeah, you can own a mansion in most
literally,
of America.
Your mortgage payments for $7,000 a month, you could be in a beautiful home, like just a home that people walk into and go, "My God, you have such an amazing house." But it was a nice 1-bedroom. But I mean, that was, now I don't know, maybe you can do a little bit better than that. But I do think that it kind of like hit a point where it's like, for that person who I was when I finished college, and I was finished, so I did finish. But for that person, it's just like, oh, that's impossible. Like there's just, so it just takes off the table, like living here. And I do feel like you feel that it's all like rich kids who are basically left. And that's why there's so many trans walking around on the streets.
Yeah, it's like you walked into a country club where everyone's perfect looking and you're just like, I am out of place here.
Yeah, it is. It's very bizarre to see the way this city, particularly this neighborhood, has changed over the years. But yeah, I've just like even taken Ubers around here, like looking out. I'm like, what am I looking at? This isn't the East Village anymore. This is something else.
If you got a girlfriend, bring her to the East Village. You'll take her down a peg.
You got a girlfriend who thinks like she's a little highfalutin,
yeah, just do a little,
maybe?
Just do a little New York City visit. And I'd
say drop her off, kick her out of the car, say I'll be back in 2 hours, make some friends, and let her come back. You'll come back to a humbled girlfriend. That's for sure. Anyway, so I was in the city because I just recorded an episode of the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schultz and Akash Sen. I love those guys. It was very fun to do that. Thanks to all those guys for having me on. Me and Andrew and Akash, like we've been doing shows together we started. I don't know if exactly started. Like I didn't meet those guys like my first year in comedy, but we were all like young comics with nothing, working clubs. In fact, in this neighborhood, we used to all work Eastville Comedy Club together all the time. And it's just cool. It's one of those, I will say there's something kind of heartwarming to see the guys you started with, who we all had nothing, like kind of coming up and getting stuff going for themselves. It's just very cool. It's a little bit of a surreal feeling. But anyway, I had a great conversation with them. We just talked about everything under the sun. So look for that episode. I think it should be out in the next couple of days. I think it was a good one. Yeah, you never know. Whenever you do these long form podcasts, you always kind of.
You haven't done. I can't think of any Dave Smith stinkers.
No, I don't really do that, man. That's not my deal.
That's other people's things.
No.
Yeah.
I leave that for other people. I crush, bro. But yeah, no, I think it was a real good one. Okay, so I figured we would talk about this. We talked about it a little bit on Flagrant, but I figured we would talk about this today just because this happened yesterday, and it is really the talk of social media. And so it's kind of like, how am I not going to address this a little bit? But I also think there's a lot that's interesting to talk about on the subject. So anyway, I did Twitter Spaces with Candace Owens that she was hosting, with Candace Owens and Andrew Tate, and a few other people were on there as well. I'm blanking on Dan's last name. Let me pull this up here. I apologize, guys.
The poker guy?
I don't think he's a poker guy. No, it was
Dan Jingo or
Dan Bilzerian.
Yeah, that's the poker guy.
Is he the poker guy?
I think so.
Maybe you're right about this. But and then also with Andrew, who's I'm blanking on his last name. I'm sorry, I probably should have just had this information ready to go when I started this. Okay, sorry. Here we go. I got it up here. Okay, so it was and then Andrew Mayer. So the five of us. I was not there for the whole time. I kind of just jumped in because Candace invited me on, or she didn't. Someone literally tweeted, was like, you should have Dave on, and then Candace was like, Dave's invited to everything I ever do, or something like that. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'll jump on for a minute, but I had to run. But it was I thought it was interesting, and Candace has really been setting the internet on fire over the last few days. And
someone's got to take on the Jewish pedophiles. Not everyone's just willing to do the research into the origins of Kabbalah and the Jewish pedophiles out there, and so she's willing to take the torch and go after. I don't know what she's talking about.
Well, what was kind of wild about it was that the guy. Okay, so first of all, so Andrew Meyer. I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but so I found this out halfway into the conversation. He is
A Jewish pedophile.
A Jewish pedophile. And it turns out he's exactly why we needed these type of Twitter spaces. No, that is not true.
Can we pull up some pictures of these
Please.
people?
Andrew, he's Jewish, so he might sue me. Do not know. No, he was actually a very good sport, and I enjoyed the conversation, and we kind of said, like, hey, we should do a thing again together. He was kind of, and I think maybe I didn't even fully process this kind of at the time, because he started by saying something like, it was along the lines of, like, I think Andrew Tate asked him, well, can you name another country where there's this relationship like we have with Israel where you can't criticize them, or whatever? And he was like, well, I think China's kind of in a similar thing. They have, and I look, I kind of got what he was saying. Like, when you've seen those things where NBA players will get asked about human rights abuses in China and they just won't say anything. The difference is that that's a little bit more of a clear business dynamic, where it's like, look, the NBA is trying to get into this market. There's over 1 billion people. They don't really want to pick a fight with the government there because the government won't let you in the market if you pick a fight with the government. But I kind of made the point to him where I was like, yeah, but dude, come on, that's not the same thing. I mean, our former Secretary of State accused China of genocide over nonsense, over Adrian Zen's numbers that were just not right. And we've had this aggressive posture toward China forever. It's nothing like that with Israel, Not only are we not talking about how, like, Israel might, the way we're like, if China ever attacks Taiwan, we'll defend them militarily, said Joe Biden. But there's no talk like that with Israel. If Israel attacks Gaza, we'll give them the weapons to do it. So anyway, but then as the conversation's going, he starts talking about how he believes they allowed October 7th to happen and how Israel was involved in 9/11. And I was like, oh, well, you might be further than me. Like, I don't know, which side are you on here? You know what I mean? So I was kind of like, almost like, it wasn't until afterward that I was thinking, I was like, so what was he really arguing? And I guess that would be what would be interesting to have another conversation with him about, because that's kind of interesting already that you're a little bit further on the being critical of Israel than I am, and you're still kind of on at least defending them in some regard. Anyway, a lot of people are very furious about this Twitter Spaces. I have gotten a lot of people, a lot of people angry at me that I was a participant in it, and I've even had let's say some people reaching out under the guise of giving me advice, telling me, this Candace Owens person is going to be your downfall. You can't continue to do shows with her. You can't continue to go on these spaces. It's just not right. So I wanted to kind of say a couple things on this.
What was the actual conversation about? Just what's going on in the Middle East?
Well, it was a bit deeper than that. I mean, at first it was like, there was stuff where when I came into it, they had already started, but they were talking about, like, the Talmud and what exactly that says that Jews are allowed to do to other people. And then the question, I guess, was kind of like, does this Talmudic belief give license to, like, the government of the Jewish state? Like, do they feel like, hey, these are goyim, and so therefore they're allowed to do whatever they want to these people?
Do you know what they were referencing the Talmud as?
You'd have to go back and listen to the spaces. I just don't know enough about it. But, like, Dan and Andrew were going back and forth, and he's like, well, what about this one and this one? And actually, I actually kind of thought Andrew was making some good points on some of this, where he's like, yeah, that's not actually the correct translation. And I've never been one who, like, gets into that stuff. I think that the truth is that, at least in my opinion, if you're judging a group of people based off religious scripture, I think this is reasonable, you can find pretty ugly parts of almost any religious scripture, and that's just not, I don't think, is a fair way to go at it. So
I can also, I mean, I have no context for what they were quoting or not quoting, but I can tell you I've spent an entire year studying a page of. This is not an exaggeration. I've spent an entire year of my life studying a single page of Talmud because the amount of
that is the Jewiest waste of time I've ever heard of.
Fair enough, but I'm just saying the amount of commentary that exists to decipher what's there, and the rabbis, in a way, with the examples, it's almost like at times they're talking in jokes with very extreme examples to prove concepts. So
is that true?
Yes.
Wow.
So I'm not there, and I don't know what was quoted, but the idea that like you could just pick up a single line English translation and say, "Hey, it says this,"
right,
and talk with some sort of an expertise of that. That's what it's talking about. It's just, I mean, I don't know. I don't have the context of the conversation, but I would just be reluctant to any individual, if you open up a random page, just read the English and said, oh, the Jews all stand by this. You could literally be referencing the wrong opinion that everyone takes issue with.
Yeah, and I mean, look, again, I know that people who are, let's say, critics of the Jews as a Jewish person, there's no winning that game.
Right.
Because if you come out and you go like, yeah, there's actually no reason to hate all the Jews. They go, see, he's controlled opposition. He's just trying to take down the temperature so we don't wake up to what's really happening. And if you say, oh, yeah, you should hate all the Jews, then, oh, I'm saying you should hate me and shouldn't listen to me. So it's like a heads you win, tails I lose type of game. I don't care. I don't find that argument to be compelling at all. Candace, but was just like, I haven't looked into this. I have not, you know what I mean? That wasn't her thing that she wanted to talk about. But I do think that, like, I don't know, you could find all types of stuff in the Quran and the Old and New Testament that don't jive with modern morality. So I kind of roll my eyes at that stuff and just go like, I'm certainly not an expert in it, and almost always the person who's quoting it to prove what, you know what I mean, they're really not an expert in it. Then the topic of conversation at one point hit on what I think is Candace's thing that she's deep down the rabbit hole on, which is the you just said the term before, the Kabbalah type stuff, and what group of Jews were. I think essentially her theory, which she did explain to me a little bit when I saw her last, but it's one of those things that I haven't read about it, so I have no. You know, like sometimes when someone's down a conspiracy and you're like, I don't know what to say here. Like, maybe it's all true, maybe not.
To me, it's like, I don't even know how many things are on the table of elements because I don't care. I'm not into chemistry. Yeah. But if you told me that there's actually supposed to be one more thing on the table of elements, okay. What the amount of research I'd have to do to find out whether or not that was true or not true, and it has nothing to do with me. It's not like I don't care. So sometimes the conspiracies all fall into that camp.
Well, right. So it's one of these things where, like, after figuring out as best I can what's kind of really going on in the world, you're not as quick to just dismiss something. You're like, yeah, maybe there is something to this. I don't know, but I can't really comment on it. But her theory, to be clear, is that essentially there's this group of really bad people who aren't Jewish, they believe something totally separate.
Is it the Bilzerian conspiracy?
I don't know exactly the details of it, but it's Frankists or something like that. But the theory is that it's like these people are kind of pretending to be Jews, and then they're bringing all the Jews, like, you know, if there's any backlash against them, they're like, oh, so you hate all Jewish people, and then they're kind of bringing regular Jewish people in when this isn't even they're not even a part of that thing. That's her theory. Whether true or untrue, I don't know enough about it to say. But even if you're operating under say it's all bullshit, for the sake of argument, let's say it's not true at all. I get so many people, like appalled that I was on this stream, and then even telling me you should never do shows with her again. You should never do this. And it's like, hey, look, what? Again, there's just kind of these red flags that pop up to me. It's like, number one, if you have an issue with the fact, if I was on a show and you have a major issue with me on that show, and that issue does not involve anything that I said on that show, I'm immediately kind of dismissing you. Does that make sense? It's like, what is this? It's a guilt by association thing? Like, I just don't believe in that. And especially when it's kind of like, dude, you could go on a show. I could go on a show with somebody I just did last night. I mean, it was a debate, but I could go on a show with somebody who's advocating that they step it up in Gaza and start killing more people. Really, the problem here is that Israel's been too restrained. Israel's got it right. And it's like, hey, if that isn't, hey, you can't go on a show with that guy, then like, I don't want to hear how I can't go on a show with someone because they believe a conspiracy that you think is wrong, or even that is wrong. The other thing is that people are telling me that Candace hates Jewish people. And I'm just saying, that is not what she's saying.
Also, you're there, so.
Right. I mean, look, it's not what she's saying publicly. It's not what she's saying privately in the conversations we've had. I'm sorry, you don't just get to say, no, I know what she really means. Even though you know her and you've had conversations with her, I don't know her and I've never had conversations with her, but I get to tell you what she really means. I've just a long time ago decided, no, that's bullshit. I'm not playing that game. I'm sorry. I think that's reasonable. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Guys, if you've been thinking about starting therapy, first of all, I highly recommend it. It's something that's helped me tremendously in the past and helped a lot of people I know. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, you got to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is you fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So simply put, it's the easiest way to start therapy. And if anything's holding you back in your life, this is the easiest way to start tackling those issues right now. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/problem, and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/problem for 10% off your first month. All right, let's get back into the show.
And what's her Kabbalah theory?
Honestly, I wouldn't do it justice telling it back to you. You got to go listen to her to hear it out.
All right, you piqued my curiosity. I'm gonna have to see what they were quoting in the Talmud.
Go here. The space is up there. I mean, the thing blew up. It had at least last I had seen. I'm sure it's up to 2 million views.
And what was Andrew Tate coming in to add to this conversation?
He seemed to, from what I was there of it, he was more just kind of talking about the relationship between Israel and the United States, right, and how kind of what Israel's doing is wrong to Gaza, and like what's the benefit for the United States? Like, why, you know what I mean? Like, this partnership seems to be costing us so much. Why is it that there's this kind of country we're not allowed to criticize, whereas like if we criticize China or Russia or wherever, or if we criticize any of these other countries, there's just not the same energy that comes along with it. You're not like worried about getting canceled over that. And at least from what he said when I was on the Spaces, I thought he was making solid points. And he was actually kind of pulling the conversation back more into what I wanted to talk about, right, which is like, okay, no, let's talk about the wars, the neoconservatives, the terror wars, what's going on in Israel, like the tangible stuff that I like to focus on more than that other stuff.
Listen, I agree with all the broad strokes of anti-Israel criticism, but you can criticize it to the same extent you can criticize anything that the regime doesn't want you to criticize. If you were talking about what's going on in Yemen a year ago, they weren't platforming you. If you were talking about how...
Well, that's not even the best example. I mean, the
Russia.
vaccine.
Well, I was going to get to the vaccines. I'm just saying, if you go to the beginning of Russia, Ukraine...
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was incredible, the pressure. As someone who went on Joe Rogan's podcast and very passionately opposed American support for Ukraine in this war, I can tell you it's... Look, all I'm saying is that, and this is why I think these conversations are kind of important to have, because I do think it's important to, point this out. Listen, I'm in a unique position to say, because I went on at the height of the Ukraine-Russia war and was passionately against supporting Ukraine financially, and I also went on at the height of this latest war in Gaza and was enormously critical of Israel. It was about the same. It was pretty overwhelming on both of them.
Right.
Like, totally viewed, you know what I mean? Like, now I will say this latest stuff with Candace it does feel a little bit like the volume's turned up on that. But I don't think it's so like overwhelmingly true. I actually think your explanation is correct, that it's like, it's kind of like whatever the regime's issue of the day is right now, you're not allowed to talk about. There's no question that just as a nation, Israel is a little more radioactive than others. You get more heat for talking about it. But look, it's not more heat than the vaccine when the vaccine was being rolled out.
I'll tell you, I got one strike on my YouTube channel this year, and we don't have to get. I had a doctor on my show who was largely defending the current childhood vaccines, and I got a strike on that just for having the conversation. I've criticized every step of the Israel war. I mean, the operation in Gaza, since I've never gotten a strike for that. So I think just to pretend like there's more censorship on the Israel topic, to me, is not true.
Yeah, I think I'm not saying even there isn't censorship, and I'm certainly not saying that there isn't like this frenzied pushback that you get on it. This is the problem with there's a real problem with starting from a conclusion. You know what I mean? And that it's very easy to, once you start from the conclusion, see all the evidence and not keep perspective with other things, where it's like, no, it is just kind of like, are you opposing whatever the dominant regime propaganda is? That does seem to be the case. I did want to talk about something kind of like the broader theme of this, which is that what people will say is that there's like kind of a rise in anti-Semitism. There's a rise in Jew hatred. And in the midst of that, you're going on these streams and you're talking to people who are whatever, I guess, seen as on the other side, or seen as aiding that, but which again, I don't really think is fair. I remember thinking this. So as me and you obviously have talked a lot about this conflict since it first started. Since the latest, I'm saying since October of last year. Obviously, the conflict has been going on a lot longer than that. But I remember which I still say was one of the most like astute observations at the very beginning of it, where you were just like, Israel's not going to be able to sell this. And you really just looked at it like as a salesman. You were just like, this is not going to work. And this was early. I mean, this was like in the first week of response when they had just turned off the water and electricity. And you were just like, no, not going to work. Too many images on social media, too many dissidents out there on social media. And I remember thinking a very similar thing where it was kind of like, I just kind of saw this coming. Not specifically with Candace Owens and not specifically with me being a part of it. But I remember thinking to myself, when Israel, when their first move was to turn off the water and the electricity, so this is, the week of October 7th, and we were kind of gearing up for like, oh my God, they're gonna, you just knew that this response was going to be unlike anything Israel's done before. It was clear from the fact that the October 7th attack was unlike anything that Israel had been hit with before, and that Netanyahu was still in there, and he was in political trouble. It was just like, and then all the signals from the politicians talking about flatten Gaza and all this stuff. And when they started with just like starving out the people, it was pretty obvious it was going to be like, this massive over response. And I remember thinking to myself, they're not going to be able to control the narrative anymore, because it's not like that guy Heidi Masson or whatever his name is. He got fired from MSNBC because he's like real pro-Palestinian. It's like, yeah, okay. You could still do a little bit of that. But how are you going to stop Andrew Tate from talking about it? You know what I mean? Like, how are you getting the landscape is different now. You can't just like control the flow of information. And I did kind of know right then, and I'm not saying Andrew Tate has done this, but I did know right then too, because I just, I've to some degree had my finger on the pulse of the internet to some degree for the last few years, that I was like, oh, there are going to be a lot of people, at least on Twitter, online, just totally flipping out and being real against the Jews over this. Like, it's just inevitable that this is going to happen. And at least to that, I think I was right about. I see it all over the place. I mean, look, it was one of the first things that that Andrew Schultz asked me about when we were talking today. And then I understand why, because, he's kind of coming at it from, he's like, look, dude, I'm a layman on this. I'm not really like deep in this, but I see people talking about the Jews everywhere. And like, I never used to see this before. So what the hell is that? And I'm trying my best to explain it. And I was like, well, it's pretty horrible what they're doing. It's the thing you're not allowed to say. And so I do think it just kind of has this energy. And then I also think people are connecting a lot of dots, some of them fairly, some of them unfairly. But this is where it's kind of ending. I don't know. Do you have any like more thoughts, or insight to what do you think is going on here?
I'm still I'm missing a little bit of context even on what Andrew was asking, but I don't see a rise in anti-Semitism in this country. I do see a rise in people being against the actions of Israel and Gaza and the level by which we support this. I think those are two separate things.
I see a rise in people talking about Jews on Twitter, to be clear.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying I don't see a rise in life of anyone being
so people talk to me. The way people talk on Twitter or the way people talk when you're playing a video game on Xbox, which I don't do anymore. I don't take that language and go, hey, this is real life or the way people really feel about
I think
things.
That's a great way to put it. That's a really great way to put it, because there is, like, I was kind of trying, I wish I had thought of that example, because I was kind of trying to say it when I was on Flagrant earlier, and at one point I was like, look, it's just like impossible to know what that is. When someone's like, hey, gas all the Jews on Twitter, you're like, what's behind that? Is it someone cracking up laughing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it kind of just like in the spirit of like talking? Is it a 14-year-old? You know what I mean? A 14-year-old who's laughing? Or is it a 14-year-old whose stepdad just beat him up and he's furious? And you know what I'm saying? Or is it a real adult who actually would love for the Fourth Reich to be instituted? You know what I'm saying? You're just like, there's no way to know. I do tend, people can say I'm being naive on this, but I also think amongst Jewish people there's a tremendous amount of paranoia about this stuff. I do think you're right. I generally think it's kind of, and I never did that, but it's kind of headset on Xbox. You know what I mean? Like just talking while you're someone up in Madden and going like, oh yeah, did you like that? Your mother liked it last night type. That's what it seems like to me.
I mean, I hope I don't kick any cans of worms here, but I don't see that much of it on Twitter. But for example, like I see it from Top, who I like Top. We're friends. Every time I've hung out with him, he's a sweetheart. I did a porch tour in his backyard. I do another porch tour in his backyard tomorrow. So, I mean, if he's an example of other people, so there's dialogue online that is completely unmatching the person that I know. So I don't
I did Top's podcast recently, and I think I said at one point on it, I was like, I don't know, I said something like, I was like, look, man, there might be these people who like to joke around on Twitter, but you don't want to live under a Nazi regime or something like that. And he was like, yeah, of course. No, it's all just around. You know what I mean? Like, so, I don't think, at least that's my suspicion. I think it's all just, you know what I mean? Like jokes, maybe with a little hint of truth besides some of them. But I will say that, I guess one of the things that really, kind of, I've just been thinking about a lot lately as I've got these people coming around me advising me not to do shows with Candace Owens or something. And it's like, okay, first of all, look, no, I'm going to do shows with her. I like her. She's been nothing but sweet and complimentary and helpful to me. And also, she's not saying, like, I don't know what to say. She is publicly and privately saying, I have nothing against Jewish people. I don't want to see more hatred of Jewish people. I have a problem with this cabal of evil people who I believe many of whom are part of this, like, satanic, like, cult type thing. Sorry, no. And, it's funny because it's almost like, it's like, look, when you have someone like that who's up there, if you're just going to call them a Jew hater too, okay, good luck. What do you want to do? You want to take out that person, and then who do you think is going to be the person who fills that space? It's like, I just think this is a very short-sighted and not a good idea. Candace is also someone, and again, look, I'm not, I have done a couple of podcasts with Candace Owens, and the last time I was down there, like, we hung out a bit and like grabbed lunch and stuff. She's, first of all, my impressions of her as a person is that she is lovely, very smart, and been nothing but kind to me. I have not detected anything that I find to be hateful in her, in all of the conversations that we've had. If she's guilty of anything, it's the fact that she's going down some rabbit holes that may or may not be entirely correct. Perhaps she's missing things on there, but that's a different accusation than being like, oh, you hate a group of people or something like that. But no, I'm not going to not do shows with someone because you feel that like there are no topics that they're hitting. I've always been so against that. I couldn't like deal with myself if I just said, oh, you're right, I better protect myself and not be able to, come on, that's never going to be me. But on top of that, it's like, I just feel like, as with a lot of these things, it's like, okay, but the elephant in the room isn't that some people on this X Spaces were talking about topics you're not allowed to talk about. The elephant in the room is that, like, what Israel's doing to Gaza is unfathomably evil, and that you're essentially not allowed to criticize it in this country. And maybe not allowed is an overstatement, but like certainly there's an attempt to put a massive penalty on you for doing so. And that, I just have so much more of a problem with that than I do with people going down conspiracies. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Moink. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef, lamb, pasteurized pork, chicken, and sustainable wild-caught Alaskan salmon all straight to your door. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should because the family farm does it better. The Moink difference is a difference you can taste and you can feel good knowing you're helping family farms stay financially independent. You choose the meat that's delivered in every box. Choose from ribeyes, chicken breasts, pork chops, salmon fillets, and much more. Plus, you can cancel anytime. I will tell you, Moink meat is incredible. I love this company. I do not trust any of the meat at the supermarket, but I do trust Moink, straight from a family farm, right to your door, and it is delicious. Keep American farmers going by signing up at moinkbox.com/POTP right now, and listeners of this show get free bacon in your first box. The best bacon you will ever taste, but for a limited time only. That's moinkbox.com/POTP, moinkbox.com/POTP. All right, let's get back into the show. It's also kind of like, I mean, she did start off by just talking about how sad it is that all these babies in Gaza are dying. And they flipped out on her for that. It's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Maybe that was a really stupid way to handle this whole thing, Like, it's like, what could you think of a recipe to try? Like, by the way, it's kind of, in a sense, when you look at it like that, it's remarkable that she hasn't just turned on the Jews at this point. These people try to ruin her life, And but I will say that I appreciate that she's stuck to that and that she's saying that publicly as well as privately, because I do think that it's unfair. It's unfair to make this about like all Jewish people, or it's unfair to draw conclusions that aren't accurate in the same way that like people get propagandized. I meant to say something on the Spaces, but just other people started talking and I didn't get the point. But at one point, Andrew Tate was asking, I think it was Andrew, was asking about like what percentage of people in Israel support what Israel's doing to Gaza. And I always am a little hesitant to say, I was talking about this on Flagrant today too, but I always go like, I don't know, man, my rule of thumb is like, I'm not against the people. I'm against the corrupt politicians. But I'm not against the people. I think that's true in America, and I feel the same way in Israel. And you could say something like, "Well, look, a lot of the people in Israel support what their government's doing in Gaza." By the way, just so we're clear, it's the identical argument that the pro-Israel people use about Gaza. They'll go, "Did you see this opinion poll? 70% of people support Hamas." The problem with that is that, first of all, support is like a weird thing. What does that exactly mean? First off, supporting a crime is not a crime. Like materially aiding a crime or inciting a crime is a crime. But like if you just like if you come and you were just like, you went and robbed a bank or something like that, and after it's over, you robbed the bank, and I support Rob for robbing that bank. I haven't committed a crime. Now, I'm not saying material support. I'm saying just what they mean by support politicians. Like, I like that. You can like that. And if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I mean, you can condemn almost every group of people. You know, it's like, okay, well, right-wingers in America overwhelmingly supported the war in Iraq. Overwhelmingly were convinced by all the propaganda. But do I look back at that and go like, all those people should be tried as war criminals? No. I mean, okay, I'm a little annoyed at them for doing that, and I'm a little annoyed at the people of Israel for doing that. I'm less annoyed at Palestine. I understand that a little bit more when you're being totally dominated like that. But that doesn't really prove anything other than the people have been propagandized and they were hit with a terrorist attack, and then their leaders came to them and said, we can make this all better by going and fighting this war. And then they went, all right, then we're behind you fighting this war. That's just, that's not the same. If that were to be the standard, then I think you could condemn the people of America, the people of Israel, the people of Palestine, all of them. I think it's more reasonable to just err on the side of like, I'm on the side of the people, I'm against the corrupt politicians. Do you agree with that, Rob? Or you're giving me some faces there like maybe you don't. By the way, before you answer, Frank, could I grab another one of these if you get a chance? Could you open it for me? Because I don't have an opener. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Can you just clarify what you were saying for me? So this is people that who are criticizing.
So if critics of Israel were to say, well, it's not just the government of Israel. Right. The people of Israel also support what their government's doing.
Okay.
So isn't it really more of a problem with Jews or Israelis or whatever?
Okay.
And I'm just saying it's like, I don't know, they were able to whip up enough American support to support the war in Iraq. I don't think the takeaway from that is that American people are evil. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that very much. You know what I'm saying? I think it's like, yeah, people can be propagandized, and I kind of blame their political leaders for that.
I think also governments can do a good job of hiding their crimes. Like, I mean, even if you were to look at Germany during World War II with the killing of the Jews, I don't think I would hold a typical German accountable.
No, that's a good point. They did hide.
Yeah, they're not actually at Auschwitz and going, "Oh yeah, I endorsed this specific activity."
Yeah,
there might be something else that they endorsed, which turned out to lead to that. But I think I'm not in Israel. I don't see the news cycle. I think that they're probably. Listen, I don't know that I would try the individuals, but yeah, there's people who probably are calling for more violence against even Palestinian civilian and children because they think that that's in the best interest for their safety, and so they're morally wrong. But no, I guess it's not.
Or as Mark Pellegrino told me last night, that those people have no rights, which was actually the argument that I got in this debate last night. Oh my God. Oh, it was just too ridiculous. But anyway, okay, so but like that's actually kind of, I guess, on point with what I'm trying to say, right? So I debated this guy, Mark Pellegrino, last night, which, by the way, I can already see.
Where's the money, Lebowski?
Well,
isn't that him?
I don't know. Was he that guy?
Frank, can you look that up? I think he's one of the.
Was Mark Pellegrino?
I think
in
he's
the
guy
Lebowski?
that he shoved the dude's face into a toilet, or he was one of. I think he's one of those guys.
Dude, it's crazy now that this is all coming together for me. Is that right? Did I debate that guy last night and I just realized it now? I knew he was on Lost. I never watched Lost. And I know he was on Dexter, but I didn't remember his character. I did watch Dexter, but I did watch Dexter. I really liked Dexter for like the first 4 seasons. And he was on in that time, but I just don't remember him from it.
By the time he came into Lost, did you watch Lost at all?
Never, no.
Oh, it's like the first couple seasons of Lost were great until you followed the whole ride and realized the writers had nothing, and he was the nothing. Like he was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, I got to stop just pulling things off memory because sometimes I get it wrong. But he was like.
By the way, that is my biggest. I'll say my biggest pet peeve with like movies and or shows or something like that is when they're building up to a thing,
right? And
you're kind of like, okay, look, you're enjoying the build up, and you're like, obviously, look, they're gonna wrap this up together, and sometimes they wrap it up in a way where you're like, that was the greatest thing ever, the way they tied it together, and sometimes they tie it together in a way where you're like, I didn't really care about that tying it together. But the ones where they just don't,
they had nothing.
You know what I'm saying? Where they just build up this whole thing, and then at the end you're like, oh, you didn't have a thing? You didn't have an answer to that? I don't know. What was the movie that and I saw this, I did not know that the Obamas like produced it, but they produced like an end of the world movie.
Which wasn't good.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, it was not good.
It's not only that it wasn't good, it was that they just got to a thing at the end, and you're like, Oh, so you didn't have a thing. You didn't have an answer. They literally at the end, they just go oh, like Iran and China and all these countries, they figured out our weakness. And you're like, and that weakness involved the deers warning us? What? It just they didn't even attempt to have an answer for why this thing, because like the whole time you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. They're kind of building something up here. Like, what? The cars are turning against us and the animals are coming out. What could this be? And they're like, Iran, You're like, wait, but how would they do any of that? And they're like, it's okay. She found a bunker. You're like, this is the dumbest movie I've ever seen in my life. And then I didn't find out till the next day that the Obamas were involved in it. So I just want you to know, I hated it going in before that was the bias. Anyway, did we figure out who was he in Lost? I mean, not in Lost, in The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, Treehorn Thug number 2, I believe.
Oh, there you go. All right, I did not recognize him. I apologize for that. I would go back. I would lose the debate if I knew that going in. No, but so it's just, look, it's this pattern again. I already see it happening. So we did the debate last night, and it streamed on some service. I apologize. Civil, I think was the name of it. And so that was the deal. It streams just there, and now it's coming out tonight for everyone. It'll be out on YouTube and all this stuff. But I already saw, it's just a pattern that I've seen happen many times before. This guy lobbied for months and months and months to debate me. As of yesterday, before the debate, he was tweeting, Dave has no idea what he's walking into, blah, blah, blah. It's like his few followers were like, he's going to destroy Dave, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I knew this. I knew this as I was saying. It's literally my wife saw that he tweeted Dave has nothing to, or it was something like that, doesn't know what he's walking into. And she was like, who is this guy? And I go, he's just going to have nothing. I go, it's going to be, I know. I already knew going in. I go, it's going to be nothing. I kind of liked the debate because he was the first objectivist that I've debated on the subject. So I thought it was interesting to like just kind of point out how supporting Israel is completely incompatible with all of the objectivist principles, which I think I did a pretty good job of. Look, I don't know what to say. We ended the debate on a nice note. I think the debate speaks for itself, and if you guys want to go watch it, I'll tweet it out when it's up. And we ended on a nice note, and then I already see him talking on Twitter about how, well, this is the reason why people think Dave won is because he used this. It's like, I don't know how many times do I just have to have someone go, oh yeah, I want to debate you, and I'm going to destroy you, and blah blah blah, and then I just wreck them. And then they're like, it's an enemy for life. It's like, oh, nothing was settled over this. You're just going to keep talking. And I can already tell. I know what's going to happen. I can predict this right now. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Crowd Health. I love this company. Look, we all know health insurance is broken. Premiums are increasing, deductibles are getting larger, and claim denials are becoming more common. The headache of health insurance is exactly why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for health care through crowdfunding. Crowd Health gives their members the freedom to efficiently and affordably break free of the antiquated insurance system and into a healthcare option that fits their needs. The insurance companies don't give you the peace of mind you need, but Crowd Health does. That's why your $50 a month membership includes the tools and services you need to get the highest quality healthcare. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks messing everything up. Plus, you'll have access to your own personal care advocate who will help you navigate the complexities of health events and even negotiate bills on your behalf. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. It's time you opt out of restrictive health insurance plans and let Crowd Health help fit your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $50 a month. And to do that, go to joincrowdhealth.com/POTP. You'll get the healthcare you deserve. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com/POTP. That's joincrowdhealth.com/POTP. All right, let's get back into the show. He's going to get dragged when this debate comes out because people are going to be like, it's so obvious that you contradicted yourself 15 different times and then refused to answer the simplest of questions, even when I asked them 7 or 8 or 9 different times. And then he's going to start talking about me because he's got to defend. And then eventually I'm going to be like, well, now I have to just talk back to you because like, how much can you talk about me before I go, hey buddy, I destroyed you last night, like, and embarrassed you. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make, though, from all of that, is that literally you have a guy with me last night who's debating with me that, and this is his argument, and go watch the debate for yourself. If you think I'm caricaturing this, I just want to say I completely understand why you think that, because you'd be like, no one would actually take this position, but I'm telling you this is the position that he took. The position that he took is that because America and Israel are, quote, rights-respecting regimes. Now, I pointed out at one point that they are not. And he conceded, yes, that's true. They're not. But compared to the Islamists, they are. So because comparatively they're rights-respecting regimes, they have a right to defend themselves. However, these Islamist regimes do not have a right to defend themselves. And in fact, their people, not the government, but their people do not have rights. That the people of Gaza have no natural rights. And I pressed him on this, and I said, well, I mean, there's some, like, is there a limiting principle to that? Because there's some pretty ugly conclusions from that. Like, if you're going to say that anyone in a despotic third world government has no rights, then can we just murder? And he specifically said there should be no rules of war also. So I was like, so can you just like round up babies and kill them all? Is that fine? And he goes, I didn't say that. You said that. And I was like, no, but it follows from your logic, right? And just wouldn't answer. Would not answer on what the standard is for when your people lose rights. And he's advocating that Israel step it up. He thinks they've been too soft. They should be killing more innocent people there. This is what he's advocating. Or to be completely fair, he's advocating they step up the fight on Hamas, and that will mean killing more innocent people, but they should do that. And so my point is that to all of the people who are telling me, don't do a stream with Candace Owens, she's too far, talking about a conspiracy theories and saying she thinks Freud was a part of some other religion, not Judaism, and that he was doing really dark things, or whatever the conspiracy is, that's too far, yet saying entire swaths of people have no rights and we should step up this slaughtering of innocent people. By the way, in the worst case scenario, if Candace Owens is completely wrong about all of this, she's talking about men who died over 100 years ago, and it has no effect on anything. But right now, women and children are being slaughtered in Gaza, and someone who's advocating we step that up. If you wouldn't have a problem with me doing a show with them, which I have a feeling none of these people, I have a feeling if I just did a show with Mark Pellegrino about something we agreed on, if we just did a show tomorrow about how regulation hurts the economy, he's an objectivist, I bet he'd be really good on that subject. If we just did a show about that, do you think I'd be getting messages from all these same people? And they'd be like, yeah, you can't just do a show with somebody who is for slaughtering innocent women and children. Even the people on the Palestinian side wouldn't be messaging me that because they just don't even think like that. And so I'm sorry, but like, you get the point I'm making? Yeah. I just think this is such to draw this one line. And essentially what it is that these people don't want to say you're not allowed to criticize Israel. So instead, they'll say, no, you can criticize Israel, but you've crossed the line with this thing, and it's going to ruin you. So don't do this anymore. I'm just
looking out for your own good, Dave.
Yeah. It is.
I'm just looking out for you. I love your career. I love everything that you're doing. And so just to help you, my friend Dave, I'm letting you know, hey, I think you're crossing the line hanging out with Candace. They're just trying to be nice, Dave.
Yeah. And you know, I don't know. Even obviously I've done shows years ago. But I've done shows with people who I think you could call Jew haters, you know? And I always had the attitude that it was like when people would be like, well, you can't platform these guys. And then I'd be like, wait, really? Is that the argument? Because people have had conversations with all types of people, and, people in the corporate media interview, whoever. They interview tyrannical leaders of countries, and they'll go, well, okay, it's not that you platform them, it's that you're too friendly to them or something like that. And even when it's debates, they say that because it's kind of like the way I treat things is it's like, if you're respectful of me, I'll be respectful of you. And I am by nature a fairly friendly person, I think. So it's like, okay, if you're respectful of me, we'll have a nice conversation. And if we disagree, we disagree. It's fine. By the way, that's how I was with Mark Pellegrino last night. The guy who's advocating the stuff I just said, I was still like cordial and friendly, and we left on a positive note. I thanked him for the spirited debate, and he said likewise. He's got a different attitude now that he's getting dragged on Twitter, but whatever. But it's like, okay, so if I can do that with them, why wouldn't I also do that with someone who, by the way, hating Jewish people is not the equivalent of nobody. By the way, and I've done podcasts back in the day with a lot of these people, alt-right people and stuff like that. Pretty much all the toxic people you could think of, I've had a conversation with. None of them ever advocated what Mark Pellegrino advocated last night to me. None of them ever said anything like, Jews don't have rights. We should step up the killing of innocent Jews. None of them ever said anything like that. And in fact, if they had, it probably would have been a more adversarial conversation. So maybe that's a bias on my part that I'm admitting to. But it's like they maybe just don't like a group of people, which is not nearly as big of a crime, as like advocating they don't have rights. But I've also always thought it was like, so what would you have me do? You would have me, if I'm talking to somebody, let's say, and by the way, I'm not talking about Candace or anyone who is on that Spaces, but if I was talking to someone who genuinely does not like Jews, maybe hates Jews, let's say, you're telling me the thing to do is either to not talk to them or be a prick to them? Why would that help? Why don't I just be like a Jewish dude who was cool, heard what they had to say, told them what I think I understand, what I think they're wrong about. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that a better strategy for how to actually maybe get through to somebody, if not them, then their listeners? This is all, I don't know, this seems like obviously correct to me. I don't know what you think.
I think, I'm just, in my head, it's very funny that you and Candace were having a conversation with Andrew Tate, because I would think that in normal circumstances, you guys would be taking issue. You guys are both socially, in a marriage type way, a lot more conservative about what relationships should look like. So,
well, I've said this publicly many times. I am not a fan of that, like the Andrew Tate pimp. I think is just horrible. And I don't know, I don't know enough about the guy, and I don't know. If I'm judging him off like very short clips that I've seen, and then it would be the fact that, at least from what I understand, him and his brother were basically locked up without charges for quite a while, and then just released
in Romania, right?
In Romania, and no charges have been filed against them. And so that, to me, is like, whatever you think it is that he did, I'm a libertarian, and that is an outrage. So I certainly think, also the fact that, so I have several different feelings about Andrew Tate. And again, just to be clear, this is from a very limited knowledge of who he is. So just to be clear, I think that, I think the pimp is disgusting. I think the kind of pushing of like the version of masculinity for young men is like get a Bugatti and bang lots of chicks and all that, I think is like up there with the worst message you could send to young men. Only a little bit better than, be a male feminist. Like, it's pretty bad. I think the fact that they were held for so long in a Romanian prison without charges, and then nothing was ever presented, and no restitution is offered, or nobody gets in trouble for kidnapping these two, is appalling. I think the fact that they are American citizens being held there, and that the American government does nothing to even attempt to put pressure on Romania to get them out, I think that is appalling. And I think that I understand why they have so much appeal amongst young men in a world that is constantly demonizing masculinity and telling men that, hey, look, we're in a DEI world, and your job is to take a step back so that a woman of color can take that position because you've held power for far too long. I totally get why the men who are coming out and being like, listen, youngster, here's what you do. Forget all that gay go take that position of power. I totally get why that's appealing. You know what I mean? Like, I think to any young man, and I'm not a young man, but I remember being one. I can still remember it. I'm young enough that I can still remember being young. I'm not quite at Joe Biden's age where I can't remember. I could, to any young man who's just not I understand why they're going to be looking for anything to counter that, narrative. So that's kind of my feeling on the Tate brothers. I don't know. What else to say other than that? I don't know. There people are like, well, that's the other thing I've been messaged. They're guilty of that. They're guilty. They were saying about the Dayon guy too. I don't even know what the story is, but I'm getting messages from people like, this guy's a rapist and this guy's a this. And I'm like, oh, well, then you should probably take that to the authorities. I don't know what to tell you. Like, is there enough evidence of that to convict them in a court of law? Then, okay, go there. Otherwise, I just joined a stream with Candace Owens, and these are the guys saying, and I'm going to judge them based off the last thing they said on that stream and whether I agreed or not with that point. I'm not, man, this was, I remember, it's really, it's a weird, like almost like throwback for me, because I remember like in 2017 when I had conversations with some of the alt-right guys and people would be like, you can't talk to him, you can't do this. And I'd be like, I was just on Fox News with a CIA operative. I think it's okay. And they're like, just explain it to me. Maybe it's just that I'm really stupid and I need these things explained to me very simply so I can understand them. But explain to me, what is the moral criteria of when I'm allowed to do a show with someone and when I'm not? And explain to me why advocating slaughtering innocent women and children is not as bad as looking into what religion Sigmund Freud really believed.
It's the same thing. It's hey, these are the group of people we're trying to ostracize, and you're not helping.
Yeah. And it's like we want there to be a social penalty for interacting with these people. And so we're going to try to impose that on you. And I'm sorry. I've just got, it's too much of me is just like, no. Sorry. You. No. Because what are you telling me? You're essentially telling me that you want me to be your like you want me to be afraid of getting like a smack on the nose with a newspaper, like I'm a puppy or something. It's like, and the people who are telling me, it's like, who are you to tell me who the I can have a conversation with and who I can't have a conversation with? Like, especially people who support what Israel's doing to Gaza. It's like, you're worse than them. I don't know what to tell you. That is worse than, even if they came out and they were like, I hate Jews. I hate them. The sight of one makes my blood boil. Even if that's what they were saying, if you're advocating that Israel continue doing what it's doing to Gaza, you're worse. You're a worse person than them. And I don't like either of those things, for the record. Anyway, all right. I thought it was worth it to kind of give my thoughts on that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Plug stuff. Yes.
Everyone, Myersville this Saturday, the OG Porch Tour at Max's house. It's one of the biggest parties of all of Porch Tour. So if you're in the DC, Maryland area, come on out for that. And check out the Run Your Mouth podcast. I'm going to dig in a little bit to what they were quoting from the Talmud, because I'm curious.
Oh, yeah? Please do. I'll be very interested to see that.
By the way, just to give you guys a bit of it, like just two quick examples for like how out of context you could pull something from the
Sure. Okay. Please do.
You could spend an entire year of your life learning about the rules for putting women to death who cheated in a relationship. And you would think like, oh, this is what they did, until you get to the last page and it says, oh, if a court ever did this twice in 70 years, they were shut down as a blood-hungry court. And then you could start digging. And then you could.
Okay, all right, that's really.
And then you could start digging into all the laws that literally make it impossible to even try the case because of all the parameters. And then you realize, oh, the 75 pages I was reading about throwing a stone on top of a lady are kind of irrelevant, but they're technical and they're argued. Or I'll give you another example.
Dude, this is the Jewish I've ever heard in my life. It really is amazing that they worked all this out.
And then you also just have to like realize the way that they talk about things, because like I said, it's kind of like jokes about the way that the laws are. So there's a line where they're talking about you're not allowed to have sex with your wife while she's on her period. And there's like full track dates on this, right? And then someone brings up like,
I'm in trouble.
Whatever. I'm not judging you. It's all good. But, you're actually in the clear, because they bring up, what about having sex with a non-Jew? And they say having sex with a non-Jew is like having sex with an animal. Now, that sounds like the rabbis are saying having sex with they're calling non-Jews animals.
Now, where are we on animals?
No,
Okay.
but really, they're just pointing out the extreme of the laws of the blood thing don't apply to non-Jews.
Right,
and it's almost funny to just, it doesn't mean anything. When they're saying animal, they're just pouring the extreme of the concept of this law doesn't apply to them the same as it doesn't apply to a sheep.
Doesn't it
Now,
feel like
yeah.
as these laws are coming out, you should just hear like, bow, dow, dow. Well, I can't do good Seinfeld music.
So I'm just saying in my limited time of half paying attention on this stuff that I wasn't that interested in.
Right,
The
right.
ability to pull things out of context, single lines. I mean,
if you really are
yeah.
in this to search for truth, you might not be actually getting it if
Yes.
you're going down that line. That's a good point. All right. Well, also, did you run your mouth? Rob's
Yeah,
other
yeah.
fans? Oh, you just did mention that. I'm sorry. ComicDaveSmith.com for all of me and Rob's dates. We will be in Dallas and Fort Worth at Hyenas coming up in just a couple weeks. Really looking forward to that one. And of course, thanks everybody. If you are subscribed, if not, if you want to get all of our episodes live, uncensored, ad-free, plus the members-only episode every Thursday, go sign up at partoftheproblem.com. All right. Thank you guys for listening, watching. Catch you next time. Peace.